The third formulation, and this one's not generally, is not as popular, not as studied, particularly not in introductory classes, is what we call the formula of the kingdom of ends. It's a little more complex. The way I'm going to summarize it, and I'm not going to discuss it anymore, is the way that Rawls puts it, or modifies it, or there's some sort of relation between what Rawls is saying here and what Kant meant with the third formulation, which is that act from rules which you would adopt if you were completely ignorant of who you were, right? So I'd be ignorant of if I was a male, I'd be ignorant of if I was an American, I'd be ignorant of my beliefs, my religion, my monetary intake, my health, my likes, my desires, my hates. And the idea is if you don't know any of that, you'll be acting from rules which are fair, because there's no way I could be acting from rules which privilege me or unfairly advantage me, because in adopting those rules and thinking about which rules I should be acting from, I wouldn't know. I'm pretending as if I don't know who I am. So I can't say that men should get the better jobs, or I wouldn't want to adopt that rule because I don't know that I'm a man under this third formulation. Kant talks about the third formulation being acting from this as if you were a legislature in a legislature which has all humans, all free wills and rational beings there laying down moral laws. But I'm going to go ahead and drop it at that. I think you can get the idea. But the important two formulations, the ones that are most studied and probably the most important for any sort of introductory course or introduction to Kantian ethics, are the first two, the formula of universal law and the formula of humanity. And we can see that they don't sound similar at all. In many cases, and maybe even in all cases, they come to the same result, but it's hard to believe with Kant that they're actually the same rules, that they're actually all the same categorical imperative. So we can see that these actually come to very different results from the other ethical systems. For example, utilitarianism. So suppose that I have a friend and they're trying to decide whether to go to school for a law degree or a philosophy degree. And I happen to know that they'll make much more money with a law degree, that they have a long-term interest in law, that they're fairly materialistic, they're not a very good philosopher. For a number of reasons, I know that they will lead a happier life if they go to law school. Unfortunately, a week ago, this person has become really excited about philosophy, but you know he tends to change his loves every week. Last week he wanted to be a barber, and now he wants to be a philosopher. So you worry that this is just a flight of fancy for him, that he wants to go to philosophy grad school. But he's going to apply to both. He's applying to law school and philosophy. You just know that if he gets into both, he's going to go to philosophy grad school. But he's asking you, so that's the scenario, he's asking you to spell check, correct, look over his applications. Now you have a choice. Are you going to help him with both applications? Are you going to sabotage one? If you sabotage his philosophy ones, let's presume that you're right about this. You're omniscient, or you're definitely certain that he would be happier if he went to law school. If you sabotage his philosophy applications, you know that he's going to live a happier life and ultimately be better off. He'll be a little upset when he gets rejected from philosophy grad school, but in the long term, he's going to end up living a much happier life. And if he went to philosophy grad school, you know that in a year he'll drop out and have to go to law school anyway. So you're saving him the trouble. So a utilitarian is going to feel a lot of pressure to say that you should sabotage his philosophy grad school applications and only help him with his law school's applications. And this is assuming that you've been unable to convince him just to apply to law school. A Kantian is going to disagree. Right? A Kantian is going to say it's not about maximizing pleasure. It's about respecting and honoring choices. So in this case, he has chosen that to try to privilege going to law school, or to go to philosophy grad school. He wants to get into philosophy grad school. So you have to respect his choices. So you can't sabotage or lie to him, or try making his choices not be successful, just for the mere fact of making him happier, right? So a Kantian is going to say pleasure is not the fundamental moral value, whereas a utilitarian will. A Kantian can say pleasure is valuable so far as we choose it, so long as we pursue it, but it's not the ultimate value, right? The choice is where the value of pleasure comes from. That seems to, my sort of example there sort of focuses on the second formulation of Kant's categorical imperative, right? The formula of humanity, which focuses on the value of free choices and not using people. But we can also see it from the formula of universal law, just because if everyone, lied to help somebody else, even if it was only just to help somebody else, the principle, when I can help someone else be happier, I'm going to lie to them. Those sorts of lies, the trust relationship wouldn't exist for me to be able to take advantage of for the lie to work, right? Anytime anyone knew that a lie would make me feel better, they would know that they were being lied to, and then the lies wouldn't work. And so as a universal principle, it wouldn't work. So we can see how Kant's different formulations are all going to sort of agree, and how they're all going to differ with the utilitarian. Kant's going to be more focused on the value of free choice and acting from these universal laws and looking at the action itself and not its consequences. Whereas the utilitarian is going to be looking at pleasure and looking to maximize that pleasure in the consequences of your actions. As far as the difference with the virtue ethicist, the virtue ethicist, I'm not sure what they're going to say about your friend and the law school, philosophy grad school case, right? They're going to weigh all these considerations, and they're going to say if you're virtuous, if you're experienced, if you're going to be able to take in all this information and then make the right decision. So maybe in some cases, if I flesh out that case in enough detail, the virtue ethicist will say that I should sabotage, and in other cases they're going to say I shouldn't sabotage. I suppose maybe if I say that he has a kid and if he goes to philosophy grad school, not only is it going to hurt him, but it's going to hurt his family, and he has responsibilities that he's neglecting in trying to make this choice. Maybe I can get the virtue ethicist to go ahead and say we should sabotage his application to philosophy grad school. Whereas maybe in a more mundane case, the virtue ethicist is going to say I shouldn't sabotage his application to philosophy grad school. So the virtue ethicist is probably going to have a sort of a split decision. Sometimes they'll sabotage, sometimes they won't. A utilitarian seems like they always will, because if that's going to really maximize pleasure, assuming that we're right about this person will be happier going to law school. And a Kantian also seems like they would always not sabotage it, right? Because they're not going to be concerned with what the bad consequences of the action are, because they're not going to look at the consequences at all. They're completely irrelevant. It's just whether this an action which violates or dishonors someone's choices? Is this an action which can be done could this action accomplish this purpose as universal law? So we're not looking at the consequences, for at least for a Kantian. So those are the three formulations. You can see that in an important way, Kant differs from the virtue ethicist in that he has these rules and he's giving us answers, right? And you can also see that it differs from the utilitarian in a very important way, because he's giving us clearly different rules and he has different values, and they work in a very different way. He does give us these three rules, but they're not as different as you might think. One case in which they might differ, so for example, suicide is a case which it seems like the second formulation, the formulation of humanity, might rule out, whereas it's hard to see how the first formulation would rule out. If everybody wanted to escape depression, committed suicide, it seems like that would succeed, right? Everybody would be dead, or maybe every depressed person would be dead, but they would have escaped their depression, right? So as a universal law, it would succeed as a principle, so somebody could act from that principle. Whereas we might see from the formula of humanity, Kant's going to worry that suicide is disvaluing your own capacity to choose, disvaluing your own free will, because you're destroying it, and you're destroying it not for some other capacity, not because of the value of your free choices or someone else's, but just to escape pain, because you think that pain is disvaluable. And clearly Kant thinks that the disvalue of pain is not that important, right? It's your free choice and your capacity to make free choices, which he claims is to be of ultimate value in the second formulation. Okay, well that's what I got for the three formulations.